Hey 3DMJers, this is the Godfather, Jeff Alberts, and you are listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today I'm talking with two other dads involved in our whole 3DMJ operation, my fellow head coach Brad Loomis and our team's injury reduction and management specialist Nick Licamelli. Competitive bodybuilding and powerlifting can be hard enough on its own, but once you add a family into the mix, the dynamics change and perspectives are definitely altered. Coach Brad has a 16-year-old son, my son is soon to be 7, and my stepdaughter is 15. And Nick has a brand new baby girl just under 2 months old. So you'll be able to hear a wide variety of parenting stories, anecdotes, and tidbits from us three dads who are all in different stages of our fatherly and athletic careers. We talk about some things we did wrong, many ways that prep or lifting can be enhanced by parenthood, and what we currently do in our day-to-day lives to manage this balance of progressing as an athlete while also creating stability for our families. As usual, if you have any feedback or comments on this particular episode, head on over to 3dmusclejourney.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Team3DMJ and leave it under podcast number 138. Here is Bodybuilding Dads featuring Brad Loomis, Nick Licamelli, and yours truly, the Godfather, Jeff Alberts.
So to my knowledge, this is the first time that we've had three fathers on the podcast, right? Because at least as far as we know, Eric and Alberto don't have kids, right? So.
Not that we know of, yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the first time. So kind of a PR for podcasting. But Nick, how is Ava doing?
She is doing well, She at this time right now, she is 4 weeks tomorrow, and it's been unbelievable. People have told me what to expect and the different things, but there's nothing like, you just can't explain what it's like. And it's just been awesome. Been a great experience so far. Yeah, she's growing and growing, making those newbie gains.
So have you? How's it going right now with having a newborn and not getting much sleep and balancing that with training and clinical work and life in general and etc.
Yeah, so it's like anything. I mean, it's like any other change in your life. So for me, you go from say like high school and then to undergrad college, and then I went to grad school, and then you get a job and you move out. And so all these different changes bring about kind of like flips your world upside down. It changes your day to day. It changes everything in your life. And right before that change, it could be scary because you don't really know what to expect. And then you just go. Time just goes, and you just go through it, and somehow you make it out. And so I kind of view it like that. It's different because it's different in kind from going from high school to college or college to grad school. But I look back at things that I've done, and I remember that feeling of, how is this ever going to work out? Like, how is this going to happen? How am I going to still work out? Am I going to, what's going to change? And then it just happens, and you find a way to kind of work around it. So leading up to the birth of my daughter, I kind of got some gym equipment. I had some old equipment from my parents' house, and I ordered some things on Amazon, and I kind of made this like mishmash little gym in my basement, kind of in preparation for the baby, so I could come down and train. I wouldn't have to leave the house, and I could still be around if I had to help, obviously, with the baby. And so that's been really, really cool. And I don't have everything that my gym has that I usually go to, but it's kind of interesting because then you have to use your head a little bit to get a workout, and you start doing things that you would never do, never do. And Jeff, recently, you posted the videos of you working out with the water jug, and right, and just kind of doing things, or you're stuck at a hotel gym and you see like a a beam in the ceiling and you do some pull-ups on it, and maybe you haven't done pull-ups in a while, but you're forced to do pull-ups. And so it's kind of cool when you're put in a situation where you don't have the luxuries of everything at a gym. You find ways to do some things that you never done before. And I've done more Bulgarian split squats in the past 4 weeks than I've done in probably the past 4 months. But it's, it's a movement I moved away from, but I was kind of forced into doing it because I'm limited on some of the leg movements I could do. So, yeah, I guess what I could say is I did some preparation leading up to it because I know that weightlifting and bodybuilding is part of who I am. So I don't want to lose that. But I also want to be there. I want to be there for the late night diaper changes and the the confusion and the mistakes that my wife and I make. And oh wait, the diaper's on backwards. Let's turn it this way. And so I want to be there for that. I don't want to be at a gym when that stuff is happening. So that's been my experience so far. I've been kind of slipping down to the basement in the morning, and I have a baby monitor with me next to me, which is kind of cool. I could turn and check her out and make sure she's doing okay. And my nutrition has pretty much been the same. You still make my food and so really the only big difference for me training wise has been that I've been in my basement now, kind of innovating and kind of to keep my routine and really just enjoy the process of this child coming into my life. Because at the end of the day, bodybuilding is not, I don't identify myself as a bodybuilder first, right? I'm sure we all are going to have, mention this throughout this podcast, but I would hope that when I'm old and gray and on a rocking chair, maybe like in outer space, who knows what's going to happen when in the future, but maybe I'll be hovering on my porch. But I hope someday that my I can look back and I can say that my proudest role and my greatest pleasure and just accomplishment and best part of my life was my family. And I want my daughter to think that about me, and I want my wife to think that about me, and I want my parents to think that about me. So keeping that in mind, it really helps put everything into perspective. I've heard Brian Whitaker talk beautifully about this same topic, how he's a father first, and then he has his different tiers where he's he's a professor, and then he's a bodybuilder after that, and keeping that in mind is really important, because when you're set, or for me anyway, when I'm set on a goal, whether it be professionally or whether it be through bodybuilding or whether it's cleaning my yard or straightening up my yard or redoing my yard, like if I have a goal, I tend to dive into it and forget everything else. So remembering that there's this tier system, and my priority is not to, my priority is to my family. So keeping that in mind, even though it's not always easy, kind of helps keep my compass is true north in mind. So yeah, that's kind of been where I'm at right now.
So not only is this the first time we've had
hey
dad right there, that's my dad.
That's another dad. That's right. We've got four dads on the podcast now. Look at that.
Yeah, dads. We've got dads galore. So yeah, not only is this the first time we've had fathers on the podcast, but now we've got 3 home gym bodybuilders on the podcast as well. So,
but I think what was really cool what Nick said was that he was like, okay, I'm gonna set up shop downstairs in the basement, and he still kept his training kind of intact, whereas I was kind of extreme. I went from because before Ethan was born, I was like, okay, I need to make sure my family's taken care of, because I was moving into, my wife's house at the time. So I was like, I got to get everything organized and structured. So I let go of training altogether for 4 months. It was extreme. It was just here's my priority. I don't care about bodybuilding right now at all. So I let training go down. I didn't train at all for 4 months, and I didn't care what I was eating. So all of a sudden I got small and fat at the same time. So, I mean, yeah, it's great that I took care of everything as far as like my family, made sure everything was organized and structured. But because of bodybuilding went like down, like I got depressed from it. So I think it's just kind of a testament to Nick that he kind of like took it upon himself to make sure like he's taking care of everything at the same time. So that was, looking back in hindsight, that was a mistake I made, was I got too extreme on one end. And that's something that I talk about a lot now with my athletes. It's not just with, being a dad or whatever, but just looking at things like it's a dimmer switch as opposed to an on-off switch. Like for me, it was either on or off from that perspective. But now I've changed over time. Like, okay, I can turn things up and turn it down when need be, but not completely turn off at all. So I think that was a good thing that you kind of pointed out. But I want to kind of use my poor judgment or bad experience to kind of shed a little light to maybe help others that maybe are like getting ready to have a big transition in life. That doesn't mean bodybuilding has to go on the back burner, or on the flip side, like, you're putting your family or whatever on the back burner, because I've done that a time or two over the course of my career as well.
That's a great point, Jeff, with the dimmer switch. And I sometimes I like a tightrope, or like a plane going to a destination. So the plane doesn't always stay in a straight line, right? It veers a little bit here, veers a little bit there, but at the end of the day, it goes to its destination. And same thing with a tightrope. You may sway here and there at different times in your life. Like if you're in a prep and you're, Jeff, I mean, you're right now. I don't know how you're doing it, but I'd imagine that tightrope has to be naturally leaning a little bit more toward bodybuilding at this time in your life, but then you're not falling off, like you're saying, you go all into something, right? So you're just kind of leaning a little bit, but you're staying on that rope. And then other times in your life, maybe you lean a little bit more toward other things, but at the end of the day, you're still on that tightrope without falling over too much into one part.
Yeah.
I was just going to share my newborn father experiences, because I was neither Nick nor Jeff. In fact, if anything, I was the opposite of Jeff, and it's not something that I'm real proud of. I don't consider it a great accomplishment, because I've shared this with other podcasts, but I was the exact opposite. I was already in prep when my son was born, and I think it was either on this podcast or maybe the Iron Culture podcast where my son was a preemie, and so they gave my wife medication to suppress the labor and prolong it to keep him cooking in there as long as possible. So I took it upon myself and made the decision, well, since this is going to be drug out for the better part of maybe a day or so, I'm going to go ahead and go hit the 24-hour fitness and go get my chest workout in. But I was pretty much the exact opposite from Jeff, when it was kind of like, I wouldn't say that I neglected my kid and I wasn't there, because luckily I was, for the most part, self-employed at the time. But at the same time, I probably had the dimmer switch full on bodybuilding / bro mode, making sure that I got my workouts in every day. Luckily I was self-employed, so I owned the gym, so I could pretty much get my training in whenever I wanted to, really. But me being the hard-headed, hardcore guy that I was, it had to be first thing in the morning at 5 a.m. And usually what would happen is I would do the midnight feeding and then go ahead and go to the gym the next morning at 4 or 5 a.m. and then the wife would do the 5 a.m. feeding. So not something I'm real proud of, but we learned from it, and now here it is, quite a few years down the road, and it's kind of like, well, we can do bodybuilding and I can go to New York with Jeff and go celebrate Worlds and coach a couple of athletes, or I can go to the kids' football game, because he's probably going to end up going to at least playoffs for the state championship, and we're going to go the other direction. We're going to attend to the family and get that taken care of, since, shoot, who knows, this might be the only chance he ever has to contend for a state championship. So I'm not going to miss out on that. So I learned from that experience.
Oh yeah, it's like this last vacation I just got back from. We went to Mexico, and I'm like deep into prep. Of course, I told my wife, why are you scheduling a vacation during my prep? It's tail end of it. Why couldn't you done this like November 17th, where I could drink margaritas on the beach as opposed to protein shakes? But yeah, it made it work. And my first thought was like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm present for the family. But at the same time, I didn't want to go back to, 5, 6 years ago, or actually 7 now. God, I can't believe he's going to be 7 already. Where I was like, okay, I'm not even going to do anything bodybuilding. So I was like, okay, I'm going to balance this out. So luckily, I'm a good learner through experience. So basically, I was like, okay, all I need to do is take my normal daily prep habits and just apply them when I'm wherever I'm going, like in Mexico. So that's basically what I did. I knew like breakfast, we were going to do our thing, because we rented an Airbnb. I'm like, okay, we're going to have breakfast before we head out for the day. So I can still control my variables really well there. So I ate my typical breakfast like I do here in California, ate with the family. And then the rest of the meals, I knew we were going to be out and about. I was going to have to probably eat out at restaurants. I didn't want to pack all my food and move it around just because the weather there is hot, it's humid. I don't want to be carrying coolers around. So I was just like, okay, just be smart when you're ordering at restaurants. I mean, every restaurant has chicken. So it's like grilled chicken, fruits, vegetables, white rice, things like that. And it's pretty easy to estimate those things. I mean, I've been basically tracking food for a long time now, so I know what a chicken breast looks like. I can estimate that pretty well. So I was just making good decisions like that. So still staying with my structure, staying on top of the prep. And let's face it, what we put in our mouths doesn't affect the family. It's not like, I have to eat a pizza to enjoy my time with family. Just me being present is all that really matters. So the food wasn't too much of an issue. The training, that was a little bit more of a challenge just because like Nick, I didn't want to be 2-3 hours of my day at a gym on a vacation, away from the family. Like, to me, that's just like, it was not something I wanted to do. It almost felt like I was going to be selfish if I did that. So usually what I was doing, like before breakfast, I would get up, have a cup of coffee. My son was up watching cartoons. So I'm like, all right, I'll just train right here in the living room. And there was a 5-gallon water jug, and I'm like, it's got a handle on it. I could put water in it. It's weight. So, hey, there we go. I can just train with this water jug. And if anybody wants to purchase the 3DMJ water jug, it's on sale now for $19.95. But anyways, I was like, doing like Nick, split squats. Like all of a sudden, I'm like gravitating toward. I'm actually doing them now. I'm back home. Like, oh, those are kind of cool. I'm gonna do them. So. But yeah, just basically just picking a handful of exercises with this water jug and doing the best I can with it. And we know that anywhere between 3 and 30 reps creates what we want, right? For hypertrophy, so I'm like, let's just make it intense enough. So if the weight's too light, if I'm hitting 20, 25 reps, well, let's just go close to failure. And I know I'm getting in good work and muscle isn't going to go anywhere. But the bottom line is I didn't want to leave my family for like 2 or 3 hour stretches. Like I could train right there with my son, sit on the couch in between sets, watch cartoons with him, and I'm still present. So that was kind of the main theme for me during the vacation, was just like try to incorporate being a dad, being a bodybuilder, and kind of doing 2 things at once, like making progress for myself so I'm not deviating from what I'm trying to attain at Worlds, and at the same time doing what I'm supposed to do as a dad. Like my number one priority is making sure that I'm present for my family. And I would say if I had to rate myself like out of a 10 out of 10 or whatever, I'd say I probably did I'll give myself like a 9 out of 10, just because I'm not perfect. But I came back from the trip and visibly looked leaner. Scale weight was about the same, but visibly looked leaner. Didn't have any regression at all. So it's definitely doable. And it's, like I said, it's more like that dimmer switch. Like even during the vacation, there was a day or two where I had refeeds. So I enjoyed extra food with the family. I think it was like 2 days before we came back home, I had a glass of wine with my wife. in the evening because we went out to dinner, had a nice dinner, and then we came back. I'm like, let's have a glass of wine. So we had wine. So I basically balanced out the best I could. And yeah, I'll leave it there because I'm starting to ramble a little too much.
How would you rate the vacation as far as like your best vacation versus, you know, your favorite vacation versus your least favorite? How would you rate this particular vacation?
Good question. So the question in a nutshell is like, did I thoroughly enjoy myself? Like, because I am prepping.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like I said, I'd rather drink margaritas on the beach, you know, and not have to eat chicken breast every day, every time at every, you know, restaurant that I was at. Just, well, I had filet mignon on one day, but yeah, I'd prefer to be like, I can do whatever I want. Like, I mean, that's a real vacation, right? But when it comes to like trying to balance out bodybuilding, this, like if you're prepping, then I think I enjoyed myself because again, it was more about my time with the family. Like I can scroll through my phone and look at all the photos. I mean, there's so many like great moments there. And then same thing, like we went on this pirate adventure where we got on this pirate ship into cruise the bay, and I was part of the show. Like they brought the pirates brought me up there and they made me dance to YMCA and all this shit, and I was like, oh dear lord. And then they made me like down a shot of rum, and I had to gargle what do you call it, la cucaracha.
Oh,
so I couldn't wimp out and say, no, I can't drink rum because I'm on my prep. You know, it's like, no, what's this gonna, it's not gonna, like in the big picture, the grand scheme of things, like it's not gonna hurt. And if anything, I could have just said, well, I'm so worried about these 50 calories or 20 calories or whatever it was. I'll just shave some food off at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not that big a deal. So I made sure to like, make sure my time was like valued with family. And if it meant like, and if I look back, like if there was a day or two where I just said, you know what, I'm just not going to track or whatever. Yeah, maybe I would have like not regressed, but maybe slowed progress down a little bit. But I mean, there's so many things you can do after the fact. I can increase cardio. I can lower food down. You know, I can not take a refeed or whatever to get that progress back. So to me, it's like I didn't want to have any regrets when I got back. Like, shit, I was way too hardcore. And because I was hardcore, I didn't enjoy myself, but more importantly, my family didn't enjoy the trip. So that's kind of like, in looking back in hindsight, it's kind of my thoughts. Like, I'm pretty content with how I handled it. But yeah, your quick answer, Brad, is yeah, I wish I was drinking margaritas on the beach.
I'm curious to ask you guys, because I've learned so much from you both just from following along over the years. And so before I ask my question, the only reason why I'm set up like this with the baby in my gym and doing my thing and is because of what I've learned from you guys. Because I was in that mindset where if I didn't have that hack squat machine or if I didn't have that certain machine, like I would feel like I wasn't doing enough. But after watching Jeff, like you just train in your home gym, and Brad, and it makes it real, and I knew that I could do it, and so that gave me, it kind of cleared the path a little bit and opened that up to even be an option for me. So I want to thank both of you for that, because you really have changed my life, and I am enjoying this process much more because of everything you guys have put out. But my question was going to be, so communication has been a huge game changer and so important in all of my relationships with my wife and my parents and all my loved ones. So I'm curious, I guess, Jeff and Brad, how do you go about communicating this stuff to different family members? So I'm sure the communication is different between your spouse as it is from your son, as it is to someone else. How do you kind of go about communicating those things to those different members of your circle?
Well, I think that first of all, knowing the at least the members of our family know how important this is to us. So I feel like they're so supportive almost to a fault. One thing that Jeff said before he left for his vacation that I can remember vividly because I went on a vacation to Florida like 5 weeks before my last show in 2014. But Susanna told Jeff, you know what, just do what you do here, but do it there. And that was essentially almost exactly what Jamie said to me when we went to Florida, when I was like 5 weeks out from, what was really like the first WNBF show to return to Sacramento in 2014. She goes, just do what you do here, but do it there. And that was really all that we needed to do, was just have that communication, because then the structure in me starts coming out and I start making plans. And this kind of gets back to the question I asked Jeff about how he would rate this vacation. That vacation in 2014, I really enjoyed that vacation. And I was not really the hardcore bodybuilder, but kind of. Yet I was still there, for my family. Because like some of the things that stick out in my mind was there was a gym that was just, literally right around the corner from the timeshare where we were staying. And I'd get up first thing in the morning, because luckily my kid and my wife and my in-laws, they're not morning people. These folks sleep like the dead until like 9 or 10 a.m. So I would just get up early, about, 6 or 7, go down to that gym around the corner. I'd get my training done, and then I would come back and I cooked breakfast for the family. And I remember it so vividly because we went to the Publix. That's people that are in Florida, they know the Publix, Publix. That's their big grocery store there. And I bought all the prep foods. I brought the egg whites and the egg beaters and bread. And I remember making French toast. The timeshare had one of those electric killets. There was 2 of them because there was 2 kitchens. One morning I made French toast for everybody, and I measured out all my egg whites and my bread and everything. And then another morning I made like breakfast burritos, and I measured out my tortillas and everything.
Wait. So you're making them breakfast, but when we went to our trip to KC in 2011, you were stealing my food.
Well, that's the important thing, Jeff, is I learned from that experience. And in 2014, I was making the breakfast for everybody. So,
all right.
But yeah, that was a very memorable vacation, and really, that's all it took. It was just Jamie coming out to me like, Susanna did, and said, "Do what you do here, but just do it there." And then me, I just had to run with it. I had to balance it. I had to say, okay, I can take advantage of this period of time when everybody's pretty much dead to the world anyway to get my bodybuilding stuff done. And then, get back home, and I can still balance making my food and hitting my macros and enjoy family time. And shoot, I remember going down to the pool, and my son and I would just swim in the pool, and that would be my cardio,
Yeah.
Yeah,
same.
Yeah.
I did a lot of swimming. Oh my goodness. Quick story, with the one resort pool we were at, there was this big palm tree, and it was in like where the kiddie pool's at. So that's where Ethan was hanging out, and there was this slide, this kid slide, and Ethan was near the slide, and all of a sudden this thing dropped out of the palm tree and whacked the slide. It sounded like a rock. It's like boom, and I'm like, Ethan, get out of there. I'm like, get over here. And he just looked at me, goes, huh? I'm like, get over here. He's looking at me all confused. I'm like, get over here. Then another one dropped and hit, and I'm like, what the heck is that? I look up, it was an iguana. It was taking a shit. It was dropping rocks, and then all of a sudden I was like, we just get this big whiff, and we're just like, oh my goodness. But yeah, it was like has nothing to do with our podcast, but I wanted to share that story.
Yeah, that's a memory there.
Yeah. But yeah, lots of swimming though. Yeah, I was doing a ton of swimming. So staying active. So that's another thing. I knew I was going to probably be more active on that vacation than I am here at home, doing reports with clients and things like that. So, which was the case, I was far more active. It's probably one of the reasons why I came back a little bit leaner.
Really quick favor, guys. If you enjoy these shows and have been a listener for quite some time, we would really appreciate it if you could take the time to give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your preferred podcast app may be. Having lots of ratings and audience feedback makes our show become more visible across multiple platforms, and it supports our mission of helping as many people as we can to be the best athletes, coaches, and lifting enthusiasts that they could possibly be. So if you're not driving and wouldn't be dangerous, pause this thing right now and give us an honest review over on your podcast app, and we would love you even more than we already do. Thanks for taking the time, and we hope you enjoy the show.
So, Nick, I have to ask you, do you plan on prepping in the future?
Yeah. Yep. So I'm not exactly sure when. Just a week ago was a year from my last show. So I want to take a little bit more of an off season. I think I don't really want to start a prep just yet. Maybe another year. I never really took a good off season, so I get that bug every once in a while. But I want to kind of be disciplined and look at the bigger picture and kind of take a good off season. But I did sort of plan. I sort of had it in my mind where after I got through my last prep and I finished up in October of 2018, once we kind of got back to normalcy and once I started feeling myself again, that was when I felt comfortable to start trying to have a baby in the first place. So it wasn't like I was expecting a newborn baby in the heart of prep. I knew I didn't want that. So I kind of strategically planned a good long off season right when we had her, so it kind of worked out nicely. But I do plan to in the future, and honestly, I think each prep that I've done, and I'm sure I'm not the only one to have this experience, but it gets not easier, but it gets different every time. And this last prep, I guess the goal was always for people not to know you're prepping, right? You want to kind of just go through it, and then a couple months into it, people say like, "Are you losing weight? Like, your clothes don't fit you anymore." And so that was what was happening in my last prep. It was actually a good feeling. I didn't tell anyone. I just started prepping, and a couple of months into it was when people started noticing. And then I said, I'm considering competing at the end of the year, and so I feel like I would be in a better place to prep with a child, and just from what I've learned from my mistakes in the past during prep. So I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it being different, because sometimes when you have a lot on your plate and when you have a lot going on, sometimes that takes away the opportunity to overthink things and waste time on things that aren't important. It kind of forces you to prioritize. So when I have in my own experience is when you have a lot going on, it's like it forces you to really organize your time and look at your day and kind of plan out a strategy. So I'm actually pretty excited, and it's just really cool to think that someday I'll be on stage and my daughter will be in the stands watching me.
It's a cool feeling.
Yeah,
for sure. I remember when I was like when Susanna was pregnant. I think Ethan was, because Ethan was born in November, and then it was let's see, that was 2012. So 2013, I was considering it, and I remember I'm like, probably not a great idea to try to prep. Oh, there she is.
There she is.
Yeah. So yeah, I just remember when I was thinking about prepping in 2013, and I kind of knew better. I'm like, you know what? It's like got a lot of responsibility here. I don't know if I want to put prep on the plate. Probably not a good idea. I go, but let me ask someone who's kind of been there, done that. So I remember messaging Brian Whitaker. I emailed him. I said, hey man, this is what's going on. What do you think? And he's like, Jeff, don't do it. He's like, basically just for the first year, just make sure you got good family routine going down and all that type of thing. Make sure priorities in order. Get some flow, and then once you're settled in, then you can probably prep. So just getting that reassurance there, I'm like, okay, that's probably what I'll do. So I didn't prep until 2014. So Ethan was a little bit older. He was like right around 2 to 3 years old during that time, which in hindsight was far easier for me to prep when he was 2 to 3 versus 6 or 7 years old now. Just because when he's 2 years old, it's more about mom than it is dad. And I remember the first year or so, I remember telling Suzanne, I'm like, I feel guilty. I feel so helpless. Like there's nothing I can do. She's like, oh, your time's coming. You'll see. And you're going to be like, you're going to say, I wish you can go back. So here we are, he's 6 and everything's like, dad, 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 dad. So trying to, like, I had more time when he was younger to myself because there was like my not responsibility, but I didn't have as many duties, let's say. It was more about mom. So I had a little more time back then. So nowadays it's like, yeah, that's the big challenge is like a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, they're very active. And when you're prepping, sometimes you're not active or it's hard for you to be active. So that's been the biggest challenge for me, this prep with Ethan, is trying to find time to wear those hats, right? Find time to be a dad, find time to be a coach, find time to be the bodybuilder, find time to be a husband. So it's just more about trying to manage the time and the energy. It's been the biggest challenge of this prep. I could deal with hunger and all that. I mean, I've prepped for so many years, like I could deal with being hungry and all that. It's more trying to manage just my time. That's been the biggest challenge, especially when I had to get out there and do 15, 16, 17,000 steps a day. That's time consuming. It's time away from the family. So that was the biggest challenge. I remember, I think I was telling you guys, Brad, that in one of our meetings, like it's just feel guilty just because I'm not as present, and that's what was killing me the most. So in a way, with 4.5 weeks to go with this prep, that's what I'm looking forward to more so than, hey, I want to eat a bunch of candy, or hey, I want the margarita on the beach. It's like, no, I want my time back so I can just chill and just have more energy for Ethan, for Carolina, and my wife.
Do you guys find that your why changes? So one of the things that I've noticed in myself is since my wife was pregnant, that little voice in our heads, like when we're deep in a set or when we're doing something, and it changed for me from that like bro from my past who was like doing drop sets and going to failure every set. Now it's more like I picture my family, and my drive now is for balance rather than to go balls to the wall. Have you guys experienced that? Like your why kind of shifts and like that inner voice kind of changes?
You just said the taboo word of balance, Nick. That doesn't exist. You got to be hardcore, sacrifice to win. But no, I get what you're saying. I think what I've learned the last couple of preps is that, because I used to have that mentality as well. I got to take every set to failure. I got to diet hell hard. I got to feel hungry. I got to feel pain. And I got to suffer a little bit in order to reach my goals. And it's true. You got to sacrifice to a certain extent. But the question for me now, after all of these years later, is like, how much do I want to sacrifice? Is it worth it? So again, like that vacation I took, it's like, okay, do I have this glass of wine with my wife here? Or do I go, I'm going to go hardcore and not have it because I need to have another line in my ass by tomorrow? So those are kind of the things that go through my mind. Like, I know I don't have to be balls to the wall to create progress. There's other ways to do it. Like, if you have, like, again, number one rule for prep, in my opinion, or number one decision you make is your timeline. So, okay, if I have 20 pounds to lose, do I do it in 12 weeks or do I do it in 6 months? Like, think of your options. Think of the flexibility you have with a 6-month timeline versus a 12-week timeline. So if I have a 12-week timeline, yeah, I'm going on vacation. I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to have to stay hardcore the entire time, and I'm going to feel stressed. I always think of like, okay, if you're going to tie your shoe, I give you 10 seconds to tie your shoe and you have to make a perfect bow. How perfect is it going to look? Or how stressed are you going to be trying to get that perfect bow in 10 seconds? But if I said, hey, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to tie your shoe, I'm almost guarantee you're going to be like very, very poised through that process, and it's going to look pretty damn good. So that to me, it's like when we talk about balance or you have to be hardcore or whatever, it's like it's more about like, okay, what your structure looks like and how much flexibility can you have within it. And again, like having time is just one component of that. It's like one part of it. So I think over the years, as I gained experience, I realized like, okay, I can still be elite, and I don't have to eat chicken, brown rice, broccoli 6 times a day, and be hardcore with my training, and not, I don't have to train 6 days a week, and if I miss a workout, it's not the end of the world. That type of thing. So I think that balance word is, because you hear that a lot on social media, especially, man, I hate to single people out, but it's just like, seems like it's the younger crowd, less experienced, super competitive. And there's nothing wrong with being super competitive and all that, but to say that, oh, you have to be this way, I think maybe perspective for them is going to change over the years once they gain more and more experience.
When you mentioned that word why, Nick, I remember when Xander was pretty darn young, my why, or my big why, was kind of like, it was clear to me that the only way that I was going to do bodybuilding was natural. There was no way that I was going to go the alternative route of taking pro hormones or, any anabolics. And what kind of brought me to that conclusion was when Xander was about, I don't know, maybe, I can't really remember how old he was, but I remember at the church, there was a little club that the kids participated in called Awanas. And it's like a little club that, the kids go once a week, and they play, and they have a little, kind of a dinner, and they read, different scriptures and stuff like that. And one of the projects they did was they did this I can't remember what it was called, but you make these little cars out of wood. And they were, gosh, I wish I could remember the name of them, but each kid would make a car, and they would race. They put them on this little track, and the cars would go down the hill, and then they would race to the finish line. And Xander got some sort of an award for his car, and so they were taking pictures. And what does my son do in the picture? All the kids are standing there with their trophy, and are standing there with their car. And what does my son do? He's got his trophy in one hand, and he flexes a single bicep with the other. And all of a sudden, it just occurred to me, he's watching everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
He is, everything that I'm doing, from getting up in the morning to going to bed at night, he is just a sponge. And not just here in the house, but when we're out and about, he's watching everything that I'm doing. And at that point, it occurred to me that one of my big whys was I need to set an example, for Xander. And to me, the only way to do that was to do it naturally. No pro hormones, no, even now that I'm older, it's like, it's tempting to go on like, TRT and different hormone replacements to kind of keep my testosterone levels normal, since mine are a little bit on the low side. But even now, it's like, at 16 years old, he may even be more impressionable now by what I do than when he was younger, So that was one of the big whys when I saw the kid didn't know how to take a picture unless he was flexing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like the same thing, my same feelings as far as my why. Like it's like when I don't know if this is how you felt, Nick, but as soon as my son was born, I was like, okay, shit, everything's going to be under a microscope now. Like I have to basically, not just about what I say, but more about actions. Like what I do just in general. Like I know like he's going to be watching, and not just my son, but just like, as a 3DMJ coach, I know people are watching us. Like, to me, just putting up just one clip of me doing a row or something like that, I know people watch that. Like, they, in my mind, like, okay, maybe no one's getting something out. I'm not saying anything. I'm not commentating on this video or anything, but people actually are observing and watching and learning. So I take it serious, like when I put myself out there, that I know people are watching, but more importantly, I know my family's like watching. I want to make them proud. I don't want to. So everything I'm doing, I'm trying to do everything I can to try to get good placings and all that, but that's not my why. Where maybe when I was younger, that was a main driving force, was like, I got to win the show. I got to win because I want to be validated externally. Like, I want people to see me as this winner. But now it's like, okay, I just want my family to see me as a winner. And it doesn't mean I have to get a first place on a trophy to do that. So it's like kind of like Brad, like, every time I see my son, he's got his shirt off or whatever, he's flexing. I'm like, okay, yeah, he is watching. Yeah, definitely, for sure.
That's
That's
really
kind of my why.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I've got only a taste of that when my wife was pregnant. I started, if you get into a little bit of a scuffle and you say some things that you regret afterwards, but then all of a sudden I think to myself, like, I know my wife and I will talk this out and we'll get past it, but like, what if my daughter was in the next room and she like overheard that conversation? Like, I don't want her to hear, it's just like interesting now, because just like you guys are saying, like, they're watching and listening and observing everything. So it really does, I guess, make us shape up. And I think back to like what I meant with like the balancing stuff is not so much like taking like everything in moderation, because I'm a huge believer in that. Like, as cliche as it sounds, everything in moderation does make you mediocre at everything, just by definition, right? So you do definitely like have to grind, and there are going to be times when you can't be there and you're going to sacrifice. But the things like, if meal number 3 on Tuesday has to be chicken and 3 rice cakes, am I going to do that, or can I just slam a Quest bar and go be with my daughter? So it's like those types of things where that's like the little voice in my head, where previously it was like, all right, I need to structure my day, sacrifice this, sacrifice that, so I have 15 minutes to make chicken and 3 rice cakes, where now that little voice is saying, like, just get, have a quick meal and go do your thing, and don't obsess over the type of food, and don't make this big luxurious meal. Just get your macros and go on to what's important and move on with your day.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, they're always watching. So I imagine that my daughter is watching me, and she's in my head, and she's listening to me kind of go through these thoughts and prioritize and make these decisions. And it definitely, just like you guys are saying, it changes your why.
Yeah, my stepdaughter, I remember when she turned 10, we went to Santa Cruz Beach and Boardwalk here in California. That's her favorite place. So we were there, and then I remember for dinner she wanted pizza, so we all went to the pizza parlor that was like in the next town over. And I just remember her, because I was prepping for Worlds back in 2014. She goes, "Are you gonna be on your diet, or are you gonna eat pizza with us?" And I was like, I'm gonna eat pizza with you. Like, for a split second I was like, no, I'm gonna diet. But in my mind, I think she was thinking that I'm not good enough for him to have pizza with me. Like I'm not special enough. It's my birthday, but he can't have pizza on my birthday. So I didn't want that impression for her. So like, you know what? I'm gonna eat the pizza, and we'll just do what I need to do after to make progress happen. And it turned out. But yeah, I just remember in that instant, I was like, no, I'm gonna stay on my diet. But then seeing those brown eyes of hers, I'm like, I'm gonna eat this pizza. So yeah, so it's kind of like you have to kind of weigh out those decisions, and like that's kind of what I'm talking about, like the balance thing. It's like, okay, all right, yeah, right now temporarily I'm not going to probably progress in this specific moment, but tomorrow, the next day, third day, or whatever, it's all going to work out. I'll find a way to get it done. So it's more about, like I said, dimmer switch. You gotta know when to turn it up, when to turn it down. And I think by having that flexibility that I've picked up over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, it's made me a better bodybuilder. Mentally, just like I think the mental makeup is huge when it comes to, especially when you're prepping. Because I've had those preps where it's just been hardcore, and I've had not so proud moments of putting prep and bodybuilding ahead of, my family back in the day. And it just created a lot of stress outside of the sport. So within bodybuilding and prep, I was in full command, full control, controlled all the variables, on point. I'm not going out to dinner with you guys because I got to do this prep thing. I was in full command of bodybuilding, but I sure as hell wasn't in command of my life and what my priorities were outside the gym. And at the end of the day, when prep was over, it's like, oh shit, now I got to deal with the aftermath of all those decisions I made during prep that were so hardcore. Because now all of a sudden, I got an ex-wife that was disgruntled. I had, family and friends that felt alienated. So now I have all of this weight on my shoulders. How do I fix this? So basically, hey, I'm an asshole for 6 months out of the year. Now all of a sudden, when it's all said and done, I'm supposed to just think like everybody's going to be okay with it because I'm prepping. So it was like, just valuable lessons that I've gone through my younger years that I'm not proud of, which is why I'm thriving now, because I've learned from it. So a lot of times on social media, I get a lot of compliments. Oh, you're so balanced, da-da-da. You put your family first, it's inspirational, but it wasn't always like that. So that's why it's important for me now. Like another reason, like a big why for me is not so much, hey, I'm trying to set a great example for my family and my kids, but also so other people can learn from me. So for me, going to Worlds, I'd love to do well and place well, but that's just kind of a small part of it. It's like I'm using the prep to kind of help teach others, how to try at least go about the sport in the best way possible.
And you're doing just that, and I'm living proof of it. If you could impact a 20-something-year-old from New Jersey, you're doing that. You're using your mistakes to help other people not make those same mistakes. And I think we're all very grateful that you share and you're so open with all that, because you're helping us, people just starting our families and just getting into the sport. So it's working. You're doing it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm almost kind of curious if the 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009 Brad would have admired you like I do now. You know what I mean? And obviously I can't turn back the clock, but if I saw the Jeff Alberts of today when I was hardcore, 2006, 2007, 2008, I have to ask myself, would I admire him, or would I be just like, that dude is soft,
That's a great
that
point.
dude should be able to flip his switch. I almost kind of wonder that.
I get a mix of that. I'm sure there's some that probably look at my approach, and they're like, oh, yeah, that guy's soft. That's why. Oh, yeah, he didn't take first in that show. Because he did eat, that ice cream or that pizza with his stepdaughter. That's why he came in second or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there's a little bit out there. But I think, too, is especially with transformation stuff, you see people's, let's say a 12-week transformation where this person loses 20 pounds and they transform their physique. Wow, that's awesome. But you hardly ever see the aftermath of that. Okay, show me the 6 months after that. How do things go after that? So that's the thing you don't see. Okay, maybe I did. Let's say there was one show where I lost a placing because I ate a box of ding dongs the weekend before. So yeah, maybe if I didn't eat those ding dongs, maybe I would have got a placing higher. But you don't see what's behind closed doors. You don't know people's situations. You don't know how their relationships are, their jobs are. So that kind of stuff, to me, I always when I see a bodybuilder on stage, whether they're super shredded or they're off, okay, yeah, they need to lose 10 pounds or whatever, I never judge solely based on how they look up there, because I know there's a story behind it. There's a journey, and I don't know the context of that journey. And I'm not too proud to see, like, back in the day when I was younger, I was one of those guys. Hey, that guy's 5 pounds off. He didn't do shit right. And you're judging him. So, but I don't know the context. So maybe there's reasons why. Maybe he didn't want to be shredded to the bone. Maybe he just felt like, hey, I look good. This is how I want to be, and this is it. And if he's happy with it, then who am I to say, hey, you're doing something wrong? So that's just kind of how I kind of look at things now. I guess call me old, call me soft, whatever. But I just think it's just, I look at things more than just one perspective, I guess I should say.
Yeah, because I know that the dad comes out in me sometimes with my athletes. And it's just that. It's context. I know the context. I just recently had an athlete compete for the first time who, I mean, this athlete did it right. I mean, trained for like a good couple, 2-3 years, did her first diet, wasn't really successful. She worked her butt off, you know. We ended up pulling the plug. It's like, you're not going to be ready in time, so let's go into a little bit of a short off season here and we'll start again, you know. And same thing, worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, and got to PR levels of conditioning, you know, for her, but she was still about 4 or 5 pounds off, you know. And the dad came out of me when it came time to, it was like, we need to have this discussion. Are we going to compete or are we not? And I did not want to sway the opinion one way or the other at all. I kind of laid it out there, and I says, I'll be honest with you. The dad in me comes out right now because I know how hard you've worked, and I know how long that you've worked for this one goal. And I know that at some shows, the bedside manner is not very good. And I told her, you know, you guys always laugh when I cuss, but I'm like, I swear, if somebody fucks with you, I'm going to be pissed. And I'm going to drive to Texas. I'm going to kick somebody's ass. Because I know how hard she worked, you know, and that dad comes out of me, and I want to be that protective person that says, okay, here's reality. You know, there's going to be a lot of people there that are in a lot better shape than you. I doubt you're going to be the worst, but, you know, here's the big thing. You've worked hard for this, and it needs to be your decision. I'm just going to lay it all out there for you. And, you know, ultimately it was this athlete's decision. But, yeah, the dad comes out in me when I know all the context, like Jeff said, and I get protective of that athlete. And not everybody's like that, you know. I remember judging at a show way back in 2009, and yeah, one of the athletes they needed to lose a good 8-10 pounds, you know, and a couple of the judges were like, I don't even know why he's up there, you know. And I'm like, I just remember thinking to myself, I think I kind of whispered to one of the other judges, you know what, maybe that dude just lost 100 pounds, you know. You never know the person's backstory, you know.
Yeah, Brad, that was a great point and a great way of looking at it, where you said if you looked at Jeff years ago, what would you think? And I think that it's true with anything. Like if the person isn't in the right place in their life to learn or to accept or to absorb a certain type of content, then it really falls on deaf ears. So even in physical therapy, I find this a lot. If someone comes in with a lot of false narratives and I with back pain, say, and I give a whole explanation of how, you know, sometimes back pain is multifactorial, and it doesn't necessarily mean that because your disc is herniated on an MRI, it doesn't really mean that that's your pain, and give a whole explanation of pain and how the patient has the power to heal themselves, and with some exercise and some guidance, you're going to be in the driver's seat and we're going to get through this. And then they'll look at me and say, like, so am I going to get, like, a massage on my back? Like, how does this work? And I'm just like, ah. So it's like, you know, you can provide what you think is quality information, but if the listener or if the student isn't in the right place to accept it, it may just fall on deaf ears. So that's a great point. I'm sitting here saying that I've learned so much from you, but I was in a point in my life where I was open and ready to learn it. Maybe if it was before that, I wouldn't, maybe wouldn't have been so open to it.
Because I remember in that 4-year span that I did 4 years in a row, the first 2 years was a lot different than the last 2 years. And the difference is right there in '08. I met these guys. I met Alberto. I met Eric. I met Jeff. Well, actually, I'd met Jeff 2 years beforehand, but all of us kind of came together, at that 08, '09 kind of transitionary year. And at that point, I was obviously a lot more receptive. And I remember just Jeff being so humble. It was kind of one of those things that kind of opened my eyes to it, And yeah, it just makes me wonder if the previous 2 years, if I would have been, because I remember Xander, like Jeff, you said that Carolina was like asking, "Are you going to have pizza with me?" Mm-hmm. Xander never asked those questions. I mean, it was just kind of like he knew from like, basically February to August or so, Daddy wasn't going to eat with us. And again, I'm not proud to say that, but that was just kind of his reality, and I remember he was probably about 10 or so, and I had taken an extended off season, and one of his big things was he wanted to celebrate dinner together. I still crack up to this day because we never sat down as a family and ate. It was always Daddy would make his food, Mama would kind of make Xander and Mom's food, and we'd kind of, one person would eat over there, and another person would eat over there, and another person, would eat. Half the time it was me, like I was eating in the kitchen, or something like that. And it was the exact opposite from the way I grew up. I mean, the way I grew up, it didn't matter what you were doing. Mom and Dad yell out the window, "Dinner time!" And I mean, kids would just go running out of the houses and, down the street, and you would sit down and you would eat together, And my son that was one of his big things. Mom and Dad, let's sit down and celebrate dinner together. Again, not things I'm proud of. To help somebody, I'm more than willing to share.
Do you guys watch the show This Is Us?
No, I don't really watch it. I know what it is, but I haven't watched it.
So one of the episodes, the kids look back on a memory that they have with their father. And so Randall and Kate are brother and sister, and they both look back on the same memory. And Kate remembers it as like this happiest memory, like they had so much fun and they ordered like pizza and they got crazy toppings on it, and then after they had dinner, like they had like a fight with like I don't know, like they threw like stuff around and made a mess and had a good time. And as they're looking back, Randall says, "But wait a minute, like think back," and then he explains what he remembers. And the father was very stressed about something, and he kind of just said, like, "Look, just leave me alone and go order yourselves a pizza. Like, get whatever you want on it." And then he got so angry and he left the room and he threw a plate against the wall and it shattered and the kids got scared, but then he managed to kind of control alt delete himself, and then he made the night fun in the end. So the point of it was that you don't have to be perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's just about making more good than bad. And watching that episode really sunk into me, because I have made mistakes just like you guys have, and I look back on it and I do things like Brad, you're saying, like I wasn't raised to do certain things. Like I was raised to sit down together as a family. If it's Sunday, we're having macaroni and we're having, it's dinner is dinner. And so I would look back at how my father was and how my brother is, and I would always compare myself to them. And every time I would have one of those moments where I would do something that just kind of seemed like it wasn't how I was raised, I would feel so regretful and I would beat myself up about it. But if I look back on my life so far, it's great. Like I have great memories with my wife, great memories with my family. And I think it comes down to not being perfect. So there is room for mistakes, and there is room for doing things that maybe we wouldn't like to do, or mistakes, I guess. But then as long as we are able to then have more good than bad, I think that's kind of the name of the game there.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for making me feel better, Nick. I appreciate that.
Well, that's a big challenge with preppers, right? Is like I get that question a lot. Like, how do I manage my food with family? Because obviously, the prepper's on a diet and the family's not. And the main thing I think is like, if you can, it's more about spending the time. So if you can sit down together, it doesn't mean you have to eat their food and they don't have to eat your food. But if you're just spending the time there, I think that's what matters the most. And man, I'm drawing a blank. Who was that? Our sponsored athlete, Brad, Smiley Elmo Jr. I remember that he gave me great advice as a dad. He said, Jeff, make your kids a part of your prep. And I was like, that's such simple advice, but it's so true, right? So it's like, hey, Ethan, check it out. Let's flex biceps in the mirror. Like, just that little 10-second engagement of hitting a front double bicep together it impresses him, right? Like, you're doing something, he's a part of it, feels special about it. So I try to do that as much as I can. Like this prep, I've been taking care of Leah on my walks, my bike rides. So we spent a lot of quality time together doing that. So things like that, I think, can go a long way. But the communication, I think, part is huge. It's like, if your family is understanding of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish and what you actually have to do in order to attain those goals, then it's easy for them to be more accepting of it. And the things that maybe they're not accepting of or they don't like, then maybe there's some type of compromise you guys can work on. So like you said, Brad, like Susanna's like, hey, we're going on vacation. Just do what you do at home and just take it there. So she's good with me like eating chicken or whatever, but what she's not good with me doing is if like I'm just like neglecting. So that's the big thing. And I do a pretty good job of not doing that. And that's because of the experiences I had in the past. But that's kind of the big thing, is just finding ways to like communicate, make sure that it's just they're well aware of what you need to do and how important it is. Like, my family knows, like, this is kind of what I do. This is my hobby, it's my job, and they know, okay, Dad has to do cardio in the morning, and I usually do it before we're really doing anything. Ethan's usually asleep when I start. They know, okay, I'm training at 3 in the afternoon. That's when they come home. And then usually, like, once I'm done training, my bodybuilding day is over. Like, I'm done 4:30, and my bodybuilding day is completely over, and I throw the dad hat on outside of doing this podcast at 5:17 in the afternoon. But they also understand that the podcast is something that I do. Like, they know that this is part of my job, and it's just what I have to do. So there's no stress about it. It's not like I'm, oh, by the way, babe, I'm going up to my office right now because I have a podcast. Like, I usually tell her, okay, on Wednesday, I have a podcast, like a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance. I let her know this is what's going on. So that way I don't throw her for a loop and she's like all stressed out. So it's about organizing, communication, and that type of thing.
That's definitely...
I was going to say, if things come up, like where if it disrupts training, then okay, how important is training on that particular day? Can it wait till tomorrow? If it has to wait, I think we know that we're not going to atrophy in one day from a missed training session. So I kind of just, use common sense and try to be as practical as possible. And I think that's what's huge is being practical. Like, some people try to be optimal. Like, okay, here's the science. I'm going to try to be optimal. But in my opinion, or I should say my experience over the years, is what I found to be practical ends up being optimal.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, you just prompted a great memory in my little pea brain here. Again, contrasting the hardcore Brad in 2003, when in 2004, when Xander was basically a newborn. I had to walk from my house to my gym and get on my recumbent bike to do my cardio. And the reason I had to do that is because in 16 minutes, I had to break my my record. How far could I get in mileage in 16 minutes? That's the only way I could do it. I had to do it that way. So I had to leave the family, walk down the street to the gym, get on the recumbent bike, and for 16 minutes go all out and try to beat my score. That was 2003, 2004. Now later on in 2000, probably 8, 9, and 10, after I had met you guys, the guy that was not so hardcore would have the wife drop off Xander and his bicycle at the gym, which was a little bit further down the road. And he would, hang out there until I got done training my clients, and we would ride our bikes home together, because I would ride my bike to the gym, and then when the wife left, she would drop him off and his bike, and then we would ride our bikes home. And it was like that every day, Monday through Friday, all summer, either 2008 or 2009. And just contrasting those two versions of Brad, the 2003, 2004 hardcore Brad that had to do it the one way that was quote unquote optimal, to the practical Brad.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is, like, you look back at your photos, you're far more optimal looking in 2008, 9, and 10 than you were in 2003 and 4. I mean, granted, yeah, you got a few more training years under your belt, but you're more conditioned in 2008, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just think of the stress that I was probably putting myself under, leaving the house, leaving the family, walking down the road, getting on that recumbent bike and then walking home, is where I just rode the bike home with the kid,
Yeah, because this is
great memory that when you said that, Jeff.
Yeah, because 2014, I went all the way to Worlds, and that was my best ever physique at that time, and it was like the approach was not geared on trying to be quote-unquote optimal. It was more like, I didn't know it at the time, but I was doing things because my priorities shifted, because I was now a family man. So I was like, okay, in my mind, I'm like, shit, I got to push a workout here, I got to do this, got to do that. Thinking in my mind, like, well, I hope I can get in great shape like I used to, So it's kind of like that through the prep. But as the prep was unfolding and realizing, oh shit, I'm continuing to get better. And, long story short, at the end of the day, it was my best ever physique. And I realized it wasn't about chasing quote unquote optimal. It was being as practical as I could be, because that was optimal. And again, it comes down to context too, like context, priorities, like all that. So like this prep now that I'm doing, I know that, like, going into it, I'm like, okay, I just need to be practical. I need to make sure I have all my shit in order. Like, I got my coach hat on, my dad hat on, like putting things in a structure and making it orderly if possible. And anytime I have to deviate from things, then okay, I just try to make it as practical as possible, because I know in the end it's going to be optimal. So it's just that my approach to the sport has definitely shifted. And I think when I coach my athletes, I think maybe, you get a few head scratches at first, because you're like, what do you mean we're not doing X, Y, and Z according to X, Y, and Z science? So I'm like, well, your context, your situation, that's not going to be optimal. Like, you may be going suboptimal, and protein might be a little bit better because your adherence is going to be better that way. Or whatever, aspect we're talking about. Like, it's not always about trying to be quote unquote optimal or perfect. So to me, I found like that's just been a least resistant approach.
Well, that 2014 version of Jeff was not only leaner, but he was heavier.
Yeah, that was maybe a pound heavier if I was lucky.
Yeah.
But no, the physique looked a little bit superior than.
Yeah.
It was a little superior than 2011 for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea of bringing loved ones along, that's a huge, huge thing that I have learned, and because I've done it both ways. So I've prepped with isolating myself and leaving the room and eating my food and then coming back in the room, or slipping into the bathroom and sneaking some food, and then going back out to work, and then I've experienced the other way through communication, just with my wife, and that she said the reason why it was the first couple times it was so awful was because there was just no communication, and she didn't know what I was doing, and she just saw me getting skinnier and skinnier and looking like I was going to die. And she had no idea what was going on. So this last prep that I did, I brought her along and I explained to her, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is the plan. But you kind of have to go like easy, like test the water, like 1 foot at a time. And if, toward the end there, when you start to look, it starts to be unhealthy a little bit, and then it's like, you got to just stay with me a little bit here until the end. But yeah, bringing and the communication aspect of it with my wife, I think going through the mistakes and learning from it, I think is going to help me then when my daughter is old enough to learn or to understand and talk to me a little bit about what's going on, because I know how important that communication was for my wife and I. So I want to bring that now to my daughter when she's old enough.
Yeah, that's this prep. I've been doing a lot of that. So like, if I have to have a digging phase, I'll tell my wife, okay, I'm gonna have to dig here for the next week or two. This is what it's gonna be. This is what it's gonna look like. This is how I may react or whatever. So if I get moody, cranky, she kind of knows, and she just leaves me alone. But I communicated it ahead of time, so it's not like all of a sudden I'm an asshole and she's like, "Where's this coming from?" It's like, so she's kind of understanding, aware of like, oh, okay, Jeff told me he was gonna go down to 1,700 calories and double up his cardio. So he's going to be tired, yeah. So it's like she's kind of aware of that, as opposed to me not saying anything. Now all of a sudden I'm an asshole, and she's like, why are you an asshole? And then all of a sudden there's a big conflict there. Now you're, arguing up all night, whatever. I mean, we never do that, but I mean, that shit happens. So like you said, the communication is so huge to kind of like, not only kind of map out the process ahead of time, but as it's unfolding too, as adjustments are being made, because you may have to do digging phases or whatever, or even communicate refeeds. Hey, I'm having a refeed on Saturday and Sunday, so hey, we can go out to eat or something like that. So just again, that type of thing goes a long ways, and it definitely helps me as a dad to incorporate the real world in bodybuilding at the same time.
One of the things I wanted to circle back to real quick was how Jeff, you were saying how there are other ways to bond with family at the dinner table other than eating the same food, right? So you can have your own different food, but if everyone's eating food and everyone's hanging out and talking about their day, the task is accomplished, right? It's family time together. The goal isn't for everyone to eat lasagna. The goal is for everyone to communicate and bond with each other.
Lasagna sounds good right now.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jeff, I'm so sorry, man.
Hey, I'm Italian too, man. So, hey.
Honestly, I'm having lasagna tomorrow for my birthday dinner. So I'll be thinking of you, Jeff.
My bad, Jeff. Jeff, there's going to be a day when I'm
going to make lasagna out of zucchini noodles.
There's going to be a day when I'm deep into prep, and you're just going to be like, yeah, I'm going to go, have a giant pizza and ice cream sundae or something, and you're going to get me back for that one. But I think another example of that is the whole intimacy conversation, right? So there are other ways to show your spouse that you love them, or other ways to connect with your spouse other than sex, right? So at the end of a prep, like we know, that stuff can get a little funky. So that same mindset, we're like, what's the actual goal here, right? The goal isn't to have sex, right? The goal isn't to eat all the same food. The goal is to bond with your family. The goal is to show your spouse that you love them. So there are plenty of other ways to do that, but I think sometimes, I guess our society or what we think is normal can overshadow what the actual goal is. And I think communication is key in that, to realize hey, everyone eating pizza isn't the goal, or the goal is to go out and have fun and go see a movie and stuff like that. So I think keeping those things in place, and even if you don't have to do those the specific tasks, you could still get the ultimate goal done.
Yeah, I mean that's a topic that probably doesn't get talked about a lot. I remember I made a video on it a long time ago about that, and it was like, whoa, I don't think anybody's ever done that before. But it's true. I mean, obviously when you get super lean, your testosterone levels are going to tank, libido gets tanked out. And I'm there. I'm right there. It's like, oh, yeah, that lasagna looks sexier than my wife right now. But at the same time, she's also well aware of why maybe my sex drive isn't as high as it used to be. So because I've communicated that with her. But at the same time, I also not selfish. Like, yeah, I don't feel like doing that deed right now, but I'm going to keep initiating because that's how important the relationship is for me and for us, is to try to do what I can to make that happen. And other things too, like there's emotional connection too. And it's hard to do that as well when you're super, super lean, you're on low calories or whatever. Like you're just not upbeat, you know? So it's important to have awareness with that, not to be selfish. And I know for me, it's like, hey, let me grab my wife's coffee. Let me pour that and just take it up to her. Let me leave a note. Even Ethan, like I told my wife, like after the podcast, I'm going to take him to Walmart and I'm going to go buy him a toy, because a little part of me is kind of guilty because I'm heading out to the guest posing in Mexico City. I'm going to be gone for 4 days. So, hey, I'm going to make it special for him before I leave. I'm going to go, him and I, go and take him, give him a little toy. I'll probably get Caroline or something. So things like that, just to kind of show that you do care about them. And it's not just about, hey, Dad's just all into this bodybuilding thing. Dad's going to go guest pose in another city. So that's important to me. And even this morning, too, eating breakfast with Ethan, because we always had breakfast together, because I take him to school. And Mom and my stepdaughter go together on their own. So he was eating what was he having? Rice milk. He was having cinnamon bread and some Canadian bacon. And I was having a protein cake. I haven't had a protein cake in forever. So I made this protein cake.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember.
It only tastes good when you're deep in prep. So I'm like, I'm going to have this protein cake. So he saw it and he's like, ooh. And I'm like, yeah, it looks good, right? And he's like, yeah. I go, you want to try it? He goes, no. I go, you sure? He's like, no, I don't want that. But I was trying to make him a part of my prep. Like, hey, I'm going to have him try my food, but he didn't want no part of it. But he does eat the little Snackwell cookies that I get. They're fat-free Snackwell cookies. Like, oh, diet cookies, and we'll have those together. So little things like that, they seem small, but they go a long ways with your kids.
And those things are going to stay there once you're out of it. Like,
yeah.
So if you buy your wife flowers every week when you're in prep, and then when you're out of prep, what, are you not going to buy them? Of course not. You're going to keep buying them. So once you're in that digging phase, and similar to injury, like as a physical therapist, I see people get injured and they're down so low. But then you find a whole new gear or something, and a whole different mindset, and then you get stronger. As cliche as it is, you do get stronger during those times, and you teach yourself and learn so much about yourself and about your significant others, and so those different things, like you're saying, the little things that show that you love your son or love your wife, those things maybe you wouldn't have thought about them if you weren't in prep, so I think sometimes being down and hanging by your last thread, you can learn a lot about yourself and about your loved ones.
What we're going to have to do, you guys, is we're going to have to schedule the sequel to this podcast, part 2, about 2 years from now. Nick's face looks more like Jeff's face looks more like Nick. And talk about this again when Nick is deep in prep, and Jeff is enjoying the off season.
And I have a 2-year-old pulling out my shirt asking me when I'm gonna.
Yeah.
So usually
go buy the toy after the podcast.
Like with my athletes, like on occasion, like if we do like a local show or whatever, and you have an athlete there competing, and they have their significant other, maybe their family, you ask the athlete, how was your prep? How did everything go? How well did you balance everything out, family and all that? And of course, 9 times out of 10, the athlete's going to say, oh, it was good. I did a great job. It went great. But you ask a significant other and you're going to get the real truth. So to me, it's like, hopefully I'm doing a good job, because if we have a sequel and if we ask Suzanne how I did, hopefully it's a good response. But yeah, it's just, you get you get the truth when you ask the significant other. And for me, going through all these years of preps, I don't even know how many preps I've done now, like maybe 14 or 15 over the last 26 years. Like those early preps, like I said, I'm not too proud of, but now I can say like I'm enjoying the fruits of my labor now. So as a coach, it's important that my athletes get in shape, of course. Like everybody wants to be on stage, their best shape. That is the goal. But my goal as a coach is to get them there at their best shape while keeping all these things that we've talked about in this podcast intact. And if they're, let's say, haven't been too ideal along the way, then I hope they've learned a lot so they can apply it the next time around. So basically, like we always say on this podcast, we're not just coaching athletes to get shredded. We're coaching careers here. And that means not just, hey, I'm trying to get you shredded, but you just all around good athlete and good human being. And I'm hoping that's a close to the podcast because I'm hungry.
Well, not that, but Ethan's got to be itching for that toy.
He probably is, but I didn't tell him. It's a surprise.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, yeah, we're good there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure talking to you guys. And like I said, you have been a huge part in who I am today, and not only the bodybuilder or the husband, but the father who I am today. So as my career continues and as my daughter continues to grow and through the different stages of her life, I can only hope that I'm half the father that you son, and I look forward to that part 2 somewhere down the road when I look more like Jeff and Jeff looks more like me. Well, I never look like Jeff, so that's not what I mean.
You're too nice, Nick. So we're going to end this podcast like this. So, Worlds, November 16th. You're going, right?
Yes.
You're going to buy me lasagna after my show.
Hey there, this is Coach Eric Helms. Thanks so much for listening to our show. 3DMJ prides itself on keeping this show, our blog, and our YouTube channel as free and relevant sources of information for our community week after week. We also release additional free video courses as often as possible at 3dmjvault.com. If you'd like to help support our mission and our work, please consider becoming a monthly patron of our endeavors. Go to patreon.com/team3dmj and donate just a couple dollars per month to our cause to help educate and grow the drug-free bodybuilding and powerlifting communities worldwide. You can definitely choose to donate more, and if you do so, we'll send you discount codes for future use on any of our paid products. But any little bit helps, and we appreciate your monthly support in any amount you see fit. So again, you can start assisting the team by going to patreon.com/team3dmj. That's patreon.com/team3dmj. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you in the next show.